This is a perfect place to be, Nina.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us. We are gonna hear about circularity, and in particular, a project about reducing single-use waste through as the Zoom account, or as the meeting invite says, through Our World. Joining us today for the presentation is Dr. Jess Watson, the Executive Director at Earth Day 365 and co-founder of Circularity STL. And I will turn it over to Jess so she could present.
Thank you, Erin. So I'm here today to talk about our journey towards wanting to promote the reuse movement locally. I'll first talk a little bit about my organization, Earth Day 365. So we are a nonprofit. We were founded in 2002, but we've been around for 30 years, running the St. Louis Earth Day Festival. But we really, over that time, have become a leader in zero waste. And after many years of focusing in on recycling and adding composting services, we're now moving to wanting to promote a more circular economy in the region. We also have another focus on climate justice, and especially connecting equity and the environment. So all of those themes really go through our major programs, which, as I mentioned, are the St. Louis Earth Day Festival, Recycling on the Go, which was started over 15 years ago now, and it remains kind of the only game in town for if you have a very large festival, concert, marathon, and you need recycling or composting services. We're the people who you come to for both event sustainability consulting and actually boots on the ground for waste sorting stations. But after many years of doing that, we really kind of were frustrated by some of the recycling that we were seeing in the region, and we wanted to really start moving towards reuse. And so the Green Dining Alliance was another of our major programs, along with Environmental Justice Days of Action. And it's kind of an amalgamation of both of our Green Dining Alliance and our Recycling on the Go programs. We launched a program that I'll actually talk a little bit about later. But first, I want to dive into why we feel that disposability is a real crisis nationally. So, you know, just looking at it by the numbers, we toss out so many single-use items annually. The number that really stuck out to me on this slide was that it breaks down to 363 single-use cups per person in the United States, which is a shocking number to me as somebody who carries around my water bottle. But if you think about the many people who buy a cup of coffee every morning, you know, it's plausible. And then if you think about the fact that so many of those are plastic, and then only 9% of plastic is actually recycled annually. You just get tons and tons of waste that is going to the landfill. And of course, single-use waste is a very big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So there's that major climate link as well. And you can think about all of the different options that people look to in terms of their serviceware. You know, there's of course the standard solo plastic cup that we're all wanting to get away from, but some people have tried to move to like a single-use aluminum cup, thinking that it's more recyclable. And we'll break down what the energy is and the emissions in each of these on the next slide. But and compostable as well. If it goes into the landfill, it actually creates methane, which is worse than the plastic. So yeah, none of these are better solutions. We really can't recycle or compost our way out of this. We've got to move towards reuse and just reducing our disposability as a society overall. So if we look at kind of a life cycle analysis of some of these different types of materials, this is comparing a reusable plastic cup polypropylene or reusable plastic serviceware, really, with a compostable serviceware or something they would sell just for like a one-time use, or these like the aluminum cups that I mentioned, or single-use plastic. And you can look down here. Many of these, they might be recycled, but actually they might be able to be recycled in some systems, but the recycling rate is often very low. And they actually take a really long time if they will decompose at all in a landfill. And so the clear choice here is really, even though we don't love sticking with plastic in this case, if we're looking at something that is able to be easily transported, it's light, it can be washed and sanitized many, many times. We did decide to stick with polypropylene as a good option in terms of materials for reuse. And so this is something I wanted to highlight, that the aluminum cups that you'll see like at the stadium, for instance, which has really focused on sustainability and is doing a great job in so many ways. But if you look at the life cycle analysis for them, they use 47% more energy over their life cycle and create 86% more carbon dioxide. And that's because aluminum is incredibly energy intensive in the initial smelting process. It is easily recyclable, and it can be recyclable over a long period of time. But if you look at the bigger picture, reuse is really a better option. And this is just a breakdown into those options, a little bit more single use for aluminum versus the compostable ware. We've talked about the main issues with aluminum, but then compostable, most of the time, unless you actually send that compostable cup to a commercial composter, it is really going in the landfill. So it's not really that much better of an option for restaurant to go ware or for cups. And some places you do have a commercial contract, and so it's getting composted. If it's a large scale event and they actually have a contract where that it is going to be composted, then that is a viable option. But if we're thinking about bigger picture, what is a better choice? And it really reuse is what we ended up as an organization wanting to promote. It is a powerful climate change solution. There are policy changes that are happening at the national, state, and local levels to really start to support these. And cities like San Francisco, Denver, and Seattle, we know they're cutting edge, are actually creating penalties for single-use waste and incentives for reuse. Some cities actually create citywide. Boulder, for instance, has a citywide reuse program, which is pretty exciting. And
compost too.
And San Francisco picks up your compost and curbside. There are many other cities that actually have started to do this. I know it feels like we're very far away from that here in St. Louis, but maybe we can get there. We would love to help move the city in that direction. And let's see if I can move this little box. Well, there we go. Yeah, I mean, we're really kind of behind in the US compared to other countries globally in terms of reuse infrastructure. If you travel in Europe, it's much easier to do this. And then St. Louis specifically is behind it if you travel to other cities. And so we're really excited as an organization, Earth Day 365, to try to help to build that infrastructure here locally, because we do feel that this would be so beneficial to many different aspects of the environmental movement here locally. So let's talk about that. How do we build a local reusables movement? And so we started off with a pilot project that we started during the pandemic called the Kind Box program. And this is a program that was spurred by the fact that we have this Green Dining Alliance program. We work with 90 restaurants locally that really care a lot about sustainability. But even with the restaurants that care about sustainability, they noticed during the pandemic, you know, the disposability of this to-go-ware, it was just huge. And it was piling up everywhere. And so we wanted to create a reusable option instead. And we picked up on a couple of models in other cities like Durham. And we were able to get some grant support. Especially, I wanted to highlight the EPA one because it'll come up later. And we worked with the city to change the health code to make this more possible. And so it was exciting, but we ran into some problems with it. And we realized that really the logistics of running a reuse program are tremendous. Like every single location has their own rules about you know, the types of boxes that they need and their schedules, and so really when we kind of pulled back and looked at other reuse programs around the country, we realized that a lesson that a lot of them were learning was that reuse doesn't work well when you're setting up kind of disparate programs that are small scale. It works well when you have buy-in from larger municipalities, or you have a larger corporation that's able to have a reach that they can have it like a centralized wash hub and really standardize and simplify a lot of the logistics around reuse. So we decided to kind of pivot and see if we could get some of this infrastructure that would make it easier for all of us, not just a few restaurants here and there, but other institutions, other potentially municipalities, other stadiums, make it possible for them to switch over to reuse. And so we did some research onto the providers, the national providers within the reuse movement, and we started talking with our world, and we were able to see that they've been expanding into new cities. I believe they're in I think 7 cities locally. There's a nationally. There's a slide a little bit later that'll show the full picture. But they had interest in potentially expanding into St. Louis. We were kind of already on their radar as a potential new location. And so we were able to repurpose some of that EPA funding that I mentioned before that was going to go to buying more boxes for this Kind Box program. And instead, we were able to pitch it as a feasibility study for trying to get a commercial wash hub here in St. Louis. So that's what we're in the middle of right now. And that's what I'm going to tell you more details about. But first, I wanted to talk about our world and what they have to offer and kind of the system that they use for reuse and for commercial washing, so that anybody who's here who maybe who might have interest in this within your organization, you can understand like how it works. So they are, you know, they are in, it's like 35 states, 150 cities. Here we go. They have current operations in 7 cities, and then wash hubs in all of these listed here: Atlanta, Austin, Boston, Charlotte, Chicago, Dallas, Kansas City, Nashville, New Orleans, New York, Orlando, Philadelphia, Phoenix. Oh, this is in the future. They're hoping 2024 plus wash hub. And look, I see us already listed. That's amazing.
And
Mac, is there something you haven't told me? And so they have built a reputation on providing reusable cups at concerts across the country, but they do actually serve a lot of other types of entities as well, including museums, zoos, aquariums, government agencies, schools, convention centers, etc. And the way that it works is they deliver these bins full of clean cups that are then served at the location. They place these very well brand kind of messaged collection bins around the venue. And then our cup picks it up on a very frequent basis, and then they sanitize it all, inspect it, and then they're able to deliver again. So this is a little bit of what it looks like. The bigger containers for moving the cups around, and the wash stations. These are some of the options for what people can choose based on their needs at their venues or their institution. And so it's not just cups. There are other serviceware options are also available. It's in BPA-free polypropylene. And then these are what some of the collection and delivery bins look like as well. They have a 94% return rate and for the cups, and so, or for the serviceware, and they're able to do that by developing some pretty clear messaging about where and how to return the cups, and the cups themselves are clearly says, you know, don't throw me away. I'm reusable. And they also provide the impact reports to each of the venues that uses their service. So that can be very helpful to find out how much serviceware is eliminated, you know, the impact on climate, etc. And while it's more expensive to do a reusable service than to buy styrofoam, for instance, there's lots of options for ways that you can kind of build it into either the initial fee or they can like sponsor an event overall. So I think it's something that there's a lot of options for, and an example would be this Anaheim Convention Center. They added a sustainability fee to the price of the conference, and then we're able to make the conference zero waste. And crypto.com arena, which is where the Lakers play in LA, they have a 96% return rate, and it's I think it's 40,000 people for 40,000 people. And now I think they've switched over entirely operations to be using reusable cups. And this was just implemented, I believe, at the end of 2023. So the feasibility study that I mentioned before, we've been working on this for about a month. We've launched the full like reaching out directly to potential venues to try to get a list of folks that are expressing interest. But we've been working for longer than that, maybe 5 months or so, to try to build the kind of relationships politically and institutionally that we would need in order to bring them in. And so we have strong support from the Mayor's Office and Office of Sustainability. They are writing letters of support for us for various grants. They connected us with SLACO to try to find a warehouse location that would be in the Promise Zone, and to look for ways that we could subsidize that location as well. We've been working on various grants that are related to circularity and that could provide some sort of portion of the financing, or provide entities with to cover kind of the fees for washing the year. We worked really closely with the Arch, the Gateway Arch, and the National Park Service. They had a lot of interest in trying to bring this into their operations potentially. And so we've compiled a list of about 100 entities locally, that's venues, that's institutions, and so we've been kind of systematically working through reaching out, and so far, so the goal of this is really to try to assemble, by adding up all of these different venues that give commitments that they would be interested in using reusables if this was an option. So the goal is really to reach about 300,000 units per month, and that would sustain the Wash Hub long term. And then they would say, yes, we're immediately expanding and building the Wash Hub here in St. Louis. So we are exploring all these options that I mentioned, and then we'll plan to have a final report with our conclusions in September, and hopefully a decision one way or another. And so the folks that have expressed interest so far, Busch Stadium is interested in potentially doing a pilot with their kind of elite 703 club, which I think would be a real foot in the door to understand whether this would work with their larger operations. Really, if we can get any of the stadiums to switch over, that would cinch this. I've been doing a lot of presentations like this to try to get the word out and have people understand what it could mean to have this opportunity available. And so I'm talking with the Green Business Challenge and trying to reach out to other corporations that are sustainability minded, because it can also be something that a corporate campus can turn over their cafeteria to have their cups and plates and things washed by a commercial hub. I'm going to be talking to the ZMD, the institutions that are in the museum district at one of their upcoming meetings, and the Science Center has is kind of expressed interest in potentially bringing this on. We're talking with the materials and recycling group of 1SDL, and then I think that our world is in current talks with the Enterprise Center, which has 18,000 seating capacity. There's continued conversations with the soccer stadium that I have personally had and that our world has had, but because they've just kind of committed to the single-use aluminum cup in the last 2 years since they've really opened, they are saying, well, we're always looking to improve our sustainability. And so this is an option for us in the future, but I think that they're not willing to make an immediate change over to reusables. And then we have other kind of smaller ones, SDL Sandbar, the volleyball bar, things like that. But we are really kind of just kicking off the official outreach in the last couple of weeks. And we really hope to kind of get up to that number where this is a feasible option for them as a company. And it really, I think, would kickstart the reusables movement in general here if this was an option, because that is a big barrier for a lot of institutions or entities, that they can't do the washing themselves and the transportation. As we found out personally, trying to do it with KindBox, it is very, very time intensive, labor intensive, and complex logistically. So I wanted to kind of turn it over to a conversation about whether this is something that you would like to see here in St. Louis, whether you feel that this would be useful for you in your organization potentially, or we can start with barriers for reuse that you see, it could be in your own personal life or in your organization. Are you already using reusables, or are you seeing a lot of pushback, or folks not really wanting to do reusables?
That's a different question.
Yeah.
Is there resources on your website that we could go to basically learn this or have this available when approaching our various employers?
So
just kind of Wash Hub 101.
Yeah, the Our World website has,
Oh, okay.
has all of these
Cool.
resources, absolutely, and they'll walk you through the whole process. And I know that, so Max Sellers is on the call, he's an employee of Our World that we've been working with closely. And he would be happy to meet with, if there's interest internally, he would be happy to kind of present it and walk you through the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I should pause and see if there's any other questions about just what I've spoken about so far.
Just what, is there a mechanism or an organization by which we could hit large events like in Forest Park or like the VP or the Fair St. Louis or?
I mean, we are definitely, like, we would use this for, the St. Louis Earth Day Festival for sure. So
Mhm.
that would be like 20,000 people. And we do have some of those on the list. So we're looking to meet with the event organizers for those kinds of, fairs. And I think we have had interest, like I've talked with Tower Grove Park about how it would be to offer this as an option to like all of the different kinds of festivals that they host in their park. So we can go about it from that angle of like, you talk to Forest Park and see if they could require something like this or suggest it as an option for event organizers. Or we can go to the organizers themselves and get them to do it.
So Our World would bring the cups and the dispense or the collection bins to the event and.
Yeah, I
Cool.
know that that's something that they have done in the past.
Yeah, that's where I see so many cups
Absolutely.
at those, all those street fest concerts.
Yeah, and I was trying to talk about that with the Gateway Arch and all of the, they host the fair, it's not called Fair St. Louis, it's called Celebration this year.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, they rebranded, thank goodness. I think that would be great if we could do that. And they were really interested because of the impact on the river. And they can see that the litter that's generated through these plastic solo cups at the celebration event, they go straight into the river, and they go downstream to the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah. Right.
Any other questions?
Mhm. What's the cost per use?
Mac, you might need to take this one.
Yeah, for sure. So the way that we are currently charging is we're including like everything that Jess described in our program in that per unit price. So it's, not only the cups delivered to you, but the return bins, the messaging, social media support, training toolkits, so on and so forth. So right now it's 40 cents per cup. And then, yeah, for every time that we deliver a cup to you to be used, it's 40 cents. And then every time an item is lost, so if a cup goes missing, we kind of tally all the inventory, typically on a monthly basis. Then we charge a 79-cent fee. And so obviously, as just mentioned, this is more expensive than single use. And so what we do is we implement usually a sustainability fee at the venues, the events, facilities that we're working at. So might be 50 cents per transaction. A lot of our venues will actively communicate this out to customers so that they can tie a specific fee to an actual impact that's happening on the ground. And we find very, very few people opt out of that despite being given the option. Until there's real systematic intervention in terms of leveraging the playing field between single use, which is often subsidized, right, via the fossil fuel industry. Reuse is going to be a little bit more expensive because it's just more involved, right? So single use, basically you're paying for someone to deliver a product to you, versus reuse, you have the entire system that is included with it, which is sending the item to you, but also doing the collection, the washing, all the labor that's involved with that.
But it's also, if you're looking at it like comparison with styrofoam to reuse, that's a huge difference. If you're looking at it with compostable to reuse, it's much less.
Yeah.
And then you don't have the disposal costs that venues have to have as well. or composting costs. Yeah.
How much is a compostable cup typically? Like this is 40 cents, what?
Matt, do you have that off the top of your head?
Yeah, that can be anywhere in the kind of low mid 20s to the low mid 30s. That's what I've seen. And typically the aluminum cups are in a similar price range, if not even higher than that.
Yes, Tom.
Well, this is an existing business, and it sounds like the details are pretty well worked out, so I don't know if it qualify or not, but there's a DOE grant called Reuse Before Recycling. It's second round of it's due in October. We're planning on applying for it for post-consumer clean polystyrene in our building system.
We're looking at a lot of different circularity grants.
Pardon?
And we're looking at a lot of different circularity grants. And there are grants out there that help support reuse these days. There's some EPA grants. There was that National Park Service grant that I mentioned before. So yeah, we're definitely actively looking into that, as well as our local solid waste management district grant.
I think this is a question for Mac. It's kind of more on the details, but when you're collecting the cups, do you need to supply any sort of bin to like capture leftover fluids or anything trash that people may have put in the cups, or have you had issues with that at collection points with what was in the cup being an issue?
Yeah, so typically we kind of act like a waste hauler in that whatever's put in our bin is going to end up back at our facility. And then first thing that we do is we empty and we sort. And so we're actually less worried about, liquid, limes, whatever else kind of thing, cigarette butts, lipstick, ending up in our stuff than we are worried about our cups or our containers ending up somewhere else, right? So we've kind of built it into the model. Some of our venues actually, they just eliminated their waste hauler and we're doing all their recycling, sorting, and their waste sorting for them. It's not necessarily our first preference, but it enables a very high capture rate for cups. Yeah, so
Okay,
we're not too worried about it. Yeah.
thanks.
Jacqueline Jezik also has a hand up online, if you want to unmute Jacqueline.
Hey guys, I had just had a question about the personalization of the cups.
The what?
The personalization of the cups, like if you personalize them, do the companies or organizations order an X amount with those on it, and then that's a certain fee too, and only those cups stay within that circular system, or if you don't, then you get cups from all over, they just go through all different organizations.
Yeah, so really, when we think about branding on cups, we're thinking about scalability and interoperability. We used to do a lot of individually branded cups. So when we started, we were actually primarily working with artists on tours, and then you might go, for instance, to a U2 show, and there would be a cup that we had created for that tour, and it would follow every single tour date, and it would say, Joshua Tree Tour 2017 or something on it, right? The issue is that the moment you really start branding something relative to an individual space or an artist or something like that, they tend to go out the door quite a lot more, because people see it as a souvenir, memorabilia, right, of their time being in that space. So we switched to a universal branding, which we've really been using since 2021. And the idea with that is any single place that you go to that's within our world system is using that same cup. That allows us to process cups and containers like a lot quicker, because we don't have to separate them out, right, by individual facilities. It reduces the amount of inventory that needs to be purchased on our end, because we can swap, between, rather than having 15 different venues, right, with different kinds of facilities. It's also just a lot more environmentally preferred. So one of the challenges that we had, right, when we were doing the tours is we'd end a tour and you know, the tour canceled 2 dates and they overestimated, you know, the amount of cups that they would need. All of a sudden we have 15,000, you know, Rolling Stones cups that say, you know, this tour on them. Like, what are we going to do with them, right? So we solve for that issue, right, by having a universal cup that can be used anywhere.
Thank you for that. Jess, I had one recommendation too for someone to contact would be 9 Mile Garden in Afton.
That's a good idea.
I know they need recycling education in general because they operate that facility the same as Cottleville, where it goes to Recycle City in St. Peter. So they just have one bin and it has recycling on it, but all of the food truck things go in there with the recycling components. But I do know their beer garden, the last time I was there, they were using non-recyclable plastic anyway. So they would be a good touch point, I think.
Thanks for that suggestion, Declan.
Can I ask how far out is efficient to, like, for example, if a wash hub is located in the city of St. Louis, I assume that getting too far away, it wouldn't environmentally balance out. Do you know, Jess or Mac, what the radius around the wash hub would be?
Yeah, so typically we try and operate within a 30-mile radius. And then anything beyond that, we typically will do only for really large accounts. Or if there's like a leg out to a nearby city where they're doing a fair amount of, you know, different kinds of activations out there where we can make it a single trip and hit like 5-6 venues, something like that. So in Denver, for instance, we can do routes up to Fort Collins and to Colorado Springs, and then also out to kind of the ski areas out west, because we have enough interest where we can justify that trip environmentally. But I think the thing to really think about in the comparison is even if you're driving a significant distance, it's better than single use. And the reason for that is because the majority of single-use products are going to be manufactured either overseas, so in China, Southeast Asia, or they're going to be manufactured in Mexico, or they're going to be manufactured, if they are manufactured domestically, typically in kind of the Gulf of Mexico region. So every single time you're ordering a cup, it, you know, to St. Louis, it's traveling, you know, however many hundreds of miles that is, if not over 1,000 miles, versus, you know, if we're driving 60 miles, you know, to some place outside of St. Louis, that's a lot better than ordering something new every single time that's manufactured several states away.
Is there a cost benefit analysis for expanding beyond cups and then replacing all disposable plastics by not having to build an internal, I just call it an internal wash hub? So it's kind of two different questions. One is there the potential to move beyond just cups?
Yeah.
And then two, is part of the conversation a reduced material cost for the hosting organization because they then don't have to invest in their own infrastructure?
They do, I think I showed you that they have other types of serviceware. And so like, I think Mac, you correct me, but like the city of Boulder, like you had a particular type of serviceware that then you guys took over the washing for it. And so they're much beyond cups at this point. And I think this is a great solution when we think about, especially like the school systems, who most of which have removed their dishwashers and switched over to this laminated styrofoam tray situation, which is unhealthy for the kids too. And so one of the reasons why I am excited to work for bringing this like commercial entity in as a nonprofit is because I do feel that it's such an important resource for all these other entities that would then have to install their own internal wash system. So I really think it can kickstart the entire reusables movement locally if we're able to outsource it to this commercial entity.
And the commercial wash hub would be developed, the St. Louis wash hub, if the cups are the inroads, would the same wash hub be able to accommodate
Yes,
plates and
Yeah,
serviceware
yeah.
and such?
right? I mean, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was what we had talked about, right?
Right, yeah, so I mean, think about kind of if you've ever been back of house in like a restaurant or a conference center or something like that, where you have a kind of a standard rack-based or conveyor-based dishwashing equipment. That's generally what we're modeled after. So we're pretty material agnostic, and we're also pretty like size and shape agnostic, as long as we can fit it right through the opening, and can reasonably stack it or sort it, then we can wash it. So we do have cups. We also have containers right now. We actually just tried out for the first time in the event a few different sizes of plates and utensils. So we're experimenting with some more types of products, but in general, you know, one of the value adds beyond just being, you know, a reusable product provider, is if we have this washing capacity, a lot of places that don't have the labor, they don't have the space, they don't have the equipment, but need something washed can tap into that, right? So trays at schools, really easy to fit into racks that could go through a dish machine, right? But a lot of them just don't have the budget or the labor. It's not consistent enough, or they've taken the equipment out. That's a place that we can step in. And we're actively looking to kind of expand our model to incorporate partnerships with more of these kinds of entities.
Yeah, and I didn't mention before, but WashU, both the Danforth campus and the med school has expressed interest as well. And I'm also in talks with the convention center, who are, I was just having this conversation with a few people before most arrived, but they have realized that they're losing national contracts from conferences because these national conferences really want certain sustainability options, which they're not currently offering. And so they are interested in this type of reuse, as well as a lot of other sustainability aspects. So I'm on a consulting contract with them right now.
What about like one-off use cases, a church, civic group, Boy Scouts, whatever, enter name here. They're hosting a Saturday night get together with 100 people. They would normally, someone would have to go buy all of the disposable content to accommodate that one-time event, because they don't have the infrastructure, don't want to spend the money to do reusable for this one event. Is there the potential for kind of one-off contracting, probably with our world, where that just gets provided, then taken away, but it's for a smaller scale than a large event of thousands?
What's the smallest scale you go, Matt?
It's not a hard and fast number. There's like a few things that we have to consider when we're thinking about smaller events. Generally, we try and contract with events that have 10,000 units ordered or more. So that's going to be kind of like a larger street festival, music festival, because once you start getting lower than that, some of the kind of upfront costs from our end about, you know, setting up, having someone there, you know, spending that time and energy on that, tends to make it so those events can be a loss of money for us, right? I say that just because, you know, we are a business, we are a sustainable business. If we're not breaking even on these events, then that, you know, limits our ability to continue doing business, right? There are cases though where we've built partnerships with kind of trusted folks who basically understand our system well enough that they can manage it on their own to some extent. And so, for instance, in Minnesota area where I'm located, we have some folks who we've worked with for a year or 2 years. They really get it inside and out. And so we don't staff those events. We often don't even need to be there to set up. We basically lent them all of the materials, and then they just kind of stand them up and take them down as they are needed. And then we just do the pickup, right, to understand what was used, what was lost, and bill them accordingly. So there are ways to kind of lower that threshold and tackle smaller events. But it does remain a bit of a challenge for something like you described with like a church event of 100 people. It's just the cost of getting everything set up from our end is typically higher than we see, higher than the return we see.
But I see great opportunity, for instance, with our recycling on the go program with Earth Day 365. Like, we are the ones that are now like a food truck Friday where maybe there's 2,000 people. So that's a lot lower than maybe the 10,000 threshold that they were talking about. But we're the ones that are already trained in managing all of the waste and compostables and recycling. And it would be easy for us to just add on reusables. And we do this many times over the year. If we do 40 events, I think that could really add up as well.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that can help people get to that 10,000 number is just if they have 5 events, in the same space over the course of a month and a half, we'll add those up and just say, hey, that meets that threshold. So there's ways that we can be flexible about that. It's not a hard and fast number, but it's a general guideline for us.
Fogel has a hand raised online if you want.
Yeah, so it seems like St. Louis needs to reach this threshold in order for our world to build a wash space here, correct?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
does the wash space have to be all our world products, or would you all be like get a say contract with the international flights going out of St. Louis to wash their trays? Is that something that could be calculated into it, or is it just like our world products?
No, yeah, happy to count any other products, like school trays towards that total.
That's a great idea. Airport, flights coming in for international. That's a great idea. Does anyone have a connection there that we can pursue?
Who's that pun? I think that's a pun.
An unconscious fun, Kyle.
I don't know about the local hospital cafeterias, but that would be nice.
Absolutely. That's also a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go back to these questions. What are you guys using reuse in your own internal systems? Like at East West Gateway, do you guys do reuse in your kitchens and your events and stuff like that?
We actually do in our kitchen. I don't know about meetings.
Yeah, we don't have much going on in the office these days.
Oh, there's not many people that are in the office and
Yeah.
having meetings. Got it.
Yeah, especially with food.
So I've been saying backsliding. We
Yeah.
were doing real good for the pandemic, and then I think the whole carry out mentality has carried on.
Absolutely.
So that's why I was asking about resources, because I'm gonna start pestering some folks
Awesome.
again.
Yeah, I think it's time, and we're trying to do the same with restaurants that we saw really do a lot of backsliding towards the disposability, and now it's time to like allow people to fill their own coffee cups again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there things that you could see as opportunities like for the region? Do you think this would be useful in other ways that you could see?
Well,
Yeah.
sorry, please.
Well, I'm just thinking the church that we attend, there's a meal that we have to have together once a month for 100 people. So that's really not enough on its own, but there are several collaborations of churches in the region that might go together, work out their schedules to get up to the threshold.
Interesting.
They do a lot of things
They
together.
do,
lots
they
of
do.
things.
I'll put that down. Metropolitan Congregations United.
Yeah.
There's, what's the really environmental one? Power and Light. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, Metro Power and Light. No, United. Forget. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I'll look into them as well.
yeah,
Kyle.
I talked to them at Earth Day, so I'd be willing to reach out to them.
Thank you, Tom. Kyle, you had something you wanted to say?
I was just gonna say, I like the mentality shift. This is a relatively simple way to engage with our waste stream. And the notion of there is no away is awfully hard to reinforce. So it definitely feels like it's one of those snowball opportunities that turns into, what else are you doing that could be considered wasteful, and then identifying opportunities. It's a gateway drug to more sustainability. And that's great.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a gate crasher, but
Yeah,
I go to a lot of receptions held at the Danforth Plant Center.
well, I have an in with them. I have a board member from the Danforth Plant Center, so I will ask Isabel about that. Yes.
So I work at MasterCard, and we've been putting a lot of initiatives to do reuse within the facility, so that's a lot of information out to the employees, they can bring their own cups in. But then most recently, we've gotten rid of all single-use cups in the office, but I do know what that's resulted in. At the end of the day, is like hundreds and hundreds of mugs kind of piling up and like the sinks and stuff, so I don't know, like, I know it's kind of an ongoing process with the buildings team, but I'm sure they might be interested in a solution like this. We have like a kitchen on site that does a lot of this washing, but there's a lot that goes into those, calculations.
Let's connect after, because I think that corporate campuses are a really good option here. And one that you really have to have an inroad with somebody, to get that conversation started. So I would love to talk about what that might look like.
That'd be great.
We've got a hand up from Katie Mike.
Yeah, and I think I'm echoing perhaps Jacqueline's comments as well in the chat. I wasn't sure if I heard you mention all of the smaller performance venues, but the St. Charles Convention Center in Lindenwood, their Schneider Center, I think it is, actually does use reusable cups for their concerts. So maybe, I know the Two Hill here on campus has in the past as well also used reusable cups. So maybe if we got these smaller venues, like, the different, not as big as the Enterprise Center, but some of the smaller concert venues might be a way to connect, and it's a different industry to tap into.
That's actually a large majority of the ones on that 100 list. The list of 100 potential vendors or that might be interested in using the RCUP services. A lot of them are those smaller event venues.
Perfect. Well, count the universities as well then too, please.
Absolutely. I mean, Katie, Mike, do you think that this is something that UMSL might be interested in?
Well, if we're already doing it at the a similar program at the Two Hill, where it's on the onus is on the venue goer to bring back the cup. This might be a possibility.
I've always wondered how well that works. Like I mean, my parents religiously have kept their Two Hill cup. Like, I don't know how many times they've actually used it, but I see it in their cabinet every time I go there. But I mean, I wonder if it would be more functional to just have like a reuse service that comes and washes them. I don't know.
Exactly. And the St. Louis Opera as well. I kept that as a little as a souvenir, I think, as Mac was saying. But I think that that so many of those, it's because the fine arts venue doesn't want the beverage spilling all over their theater. So maybe there's something to tap into there.
Yeah, I like those ideas. And thank you, Jacqueline, for your suggestions online of the St. Charles Convention Center, Lindenwood U, and Main Street, St. Charles. With Interfaith Power and Light. Yes, very cool organization. Who am I missing? Felt like there was someone else who wanted to speak. No. Okay.
Oh wait, Aaron, did you say something? Oh, okay.
I do have another question, to be still in that mode.
We are still in that mode.
Is there ever a point that we reach price parity between ongoing purchases of disposable versus the upfront cost for this service? You know, in 1 year, you've spent the same amount of money. I guess it's for Mac, is that mathematics available, or is that very specific to the supply chain and what you're buying and all sorts of details? So you can't really say, like with solar, your investment returns, the investment pays for itself after X amount of time.
So
Right.
Mac, I'll just take that for a second, then you have your own answer. We have a couple of grants where we provide mini grants for restaurants or entities to switch away from disposable plastics and to use better options. Sometimes they're reusable, sometimes they're compostables, but we have what's called a plastic footprint calculator. And so it does allow these restaurants or other entities to see the amount that they're spending on these disposables, and then how much they would be getting back, and how much they're saving. So you could easily, it's I don't think we have it linked publicly, but it's on the Product Stewardship Institute website, but I can share that out, the plastic footprint calculator. So yes, there are tools where you can see that cost comparison and how long it would take you to hit that break even point. And Mac, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say there's kind of two different versions here, right? If you're a restaurant that buys a dish machine, you start washing on site, you replace all your single use with reusables. There's absolutely a point where you're going to break even, right? And then start saving money in the long term. With a third-party service, it's a little bit of a trickier picture, right? Because we're charging on that per unit level, and right now that per unit level is going to be higher than single use, right? There's a couple savings that you can activate, like, you know, no disposals fees, no contamination fees, save money on labor. But at this point, we haven't seen that those savings will be higher than kind of that delta between reuse and single use. And so that's why we have things like that sustainability fee to bring in a little bit of extra revenue. So that, right, you're basically helping to fund the program through a little bit of extra revenue. And until I think there's some broader societal shifts that happen, like I mentioned before, I don't think that in kind of the third party washing provider context that there's going to be like a price parity or a price or a cost savings overall through doing reuse, just to be totally honest.
Oh, could you lie? Actually, that'd be better.
Okay, yeah.
And I think we have to think about it on the other side too, of the producers of these disposable plastics, and also products that are in disposable plastics, like Coca-Cola in a plastic bottle. Like, we have to hold these manufacturers to the extended producer responsibility. So there's starting to be legislation to require that, and there's a whole push on that side as well. And so I think that that's the direction that we have to push in society in order to create this kind of parity and to have pushes from an economic standpoint towards reuse.
Totally. And if folks aren't familiar with EPR, we actually just passed a law here in Minnesota. You know, these companies who produce disposable products have basically been able to outsource a certain amount of their costs by making taxpayers and municipalities foot the bill of actually managing the waste that's a product of those products, right? And so EPR legislation basically says if you want to produce a wasteful product, you actually have to pay for its end of life too, rather than taxpayers. And so it disincentivizes single use and oftentimes collects fees, which then can fund switches to alternative materials, building of reuse infrastructure, things like that. So I think there's 7 or 8 states that now have EPR legislation. There's also a fair amount of it abroad in Europe and some parts of Asia. So it could be a pretty significant tool for that shift in the long term.
And if I could also mention, please correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to EPR, there's an opportunity to have those companies pay for reuse or for more recycling infrastructure. And even though like we want people to recycle, reuse is probably a environmentally preferable way to go. What would you say?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also mention, you can see this little logo here in the corner, circular SDL. And this, below it is like a representation of like designing towards a more circular economic system in general. But I wanted to say that there's a group of people, that this coalition, Circular SDL, of entities, including businesses, municipalities, and nonprofits that are really looking at trying to promote more circular policies and ways of designing your own internal systems. And so they've been getting together, and if you'd like to know more about that or join that group, there's visit circularsdl.org, Anna. And there's a newsletter you can sign up for to keep abreast of what's going on in circularity in the region. And we're planning on having a kind of like a half-day conference that would focus on circularity in the fall. So Anna, did you want to talk at all about what that might look like? Or
Well, it's still in the planning phases, I would say, the conference. So but definitely more information will be shared in that newsletter as it gets more planned out.
So sign up on the website for more information.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. And there's also a question in the chat that I think Mac already mentioned, but someone might have joined late. The price comparison of reusable aluminum, wait a minute, versus reusable plastic. Okay, so they're talking about
so it's
if both are
basically
reusable.
recyclable aluminum. It's like the single-use aluminum cups is like what I think you're talking about. They're not actually designed to be washed and reused because they have like a film on them. Although people are taking them home as like souvenir cups and using them at home.
And that's what Busch Stadium is doing.
No,
Or
that's
the
what
soccer
the
stadium.
soccer stadium is doing. Busch Stadium is definitely not as sustainable. Yeah. But we hope to get them there.
Mhm.
And so Max, did you want to answer the price comparison?
Yeah. So what Jess just said, we've actually talked with the manufacturer of these single-use aluminum cups, and they've said, yeah, we haven't developed a coating yet that would allow us to reuse them as many times as you'd like. Our current one, if you put in that at-home dishwasher, the coating just washes off. And so they can't be reused. You're drinking off straight aluminum, which is chemically not a great time. So cost comparison wise, I mean, we've seen some folks are getting deals kind of in the mid-20s, mid-20 cents per cup to high 30s for single-use aluminum cups. So in that case, it's actually pretty price comparable between reuse and single-use aluminum.
Yeah, Tom?
Is there significant job creation or higher wages for this kind of work associated with this?
I know the city is interested in like the green job aspect, but it's not a huge number of people that would be hired in the wash up. Do you have an estimate, Max? I think I remember something like 8 to 10 jobs, something like that.
Yeah, depending on the maturity of the hub, somewhere from kind of 5 in the early stage to like 12, right? When you have more things going on. Yeah, it's pretty modest job creation. This isn't Facebook announcing some new data center that's going to create hundreds of jobs, right? It's a more modest operation than that. Wages are fair. We try and pay very good living wages, regardless of where you are in the organization, how high up you are. So it's good work, good wages. We often partner with second chance organizations too, to try and bring some people into the workplace that have typically been excluded from it. So we try and bring some dignity to that aspect as well.
Yeah.
what are some ways that, Matt, your organization is more sustainable from like a wash up perspective? Like, are you using technology that's reusing the water? Do you plan on using like renewables to power your operation? Or, you know, how are you making that operation more sustainable for the whole life cycle analysis?
Yeah, for sure. Great question. Yeah, so there are definitely some improvements that we could be making, right? You know, as a fairly early company, right, that is trying to make our way into, you know, disrupting a very, very large industry, like we don't have a ton of cash, right, to just be able to throw at every single process improvement that we want right away, right? So things like vehicle electrification are on the horizon, something that we want to do. But right now we don't have capital to purchase a fleet of electric vehicles, right? But in terms of like what we're actively doing, so we partner with Ecolab, which is based here in the Twin Cities, global leader in sustainability and sanitization. And so they provide us with complete oversight of our washing process. So we have partnered with them for a lot of the technology surrounding our machines to make sure that we're washing like the least amount of energy and the least amount of chemicals and the least amount of water that we can, and still achieve, you know, high degrees of sanitation. So, you know, right now it's less than 3 ounces of water to wash a single cup in one of our systems. Versus creating a new single-use cup could be anywhere from 60 to 70 ounces of water to create. So significant water savings there. So that's been our primary focus kind of in this early stages, is really getting that washing tech as lean as we can. And now we're exploring some of those additional steps with transportation, right, electrification, and then navigating the question of electrifying, you know, via solar, all of our wash hubs. Because right now we are leasing our buildings. We don't have ability to purchase or build our own buildings right at this point, this stage in the company. So navigating the question of bringing solar onto a leased space is a little bit tricky, but something we're actively looking into.
Okay, well, I'm going to thank everybody for coming out. For those of us in person, we will be convening over to the T-Rex Lounge for some networking. I would like to encourage you to come to next month's lab. The exact description isn't worked out yet, but I'm talking to some folks in the insurance industry to come and talk to us about how they are assessing risks from climate change and extreme weather events in the insurance industry, and maybe hopefully give us some sort of forecast about what we can expect with your future insurance prices. And one of the speakers will be from California, who's had to deal with the wildfires, and she's got ideas on what they would have liked to do, and maybe got some lessons learned here. So it is a huge cost that's on the horizon that's going to affect a lot of people and a lot of urban.
It's here, man. Not on the horizon.
Yeah,
it's happening right now.
So hopefully we'll get some good insights from the insurance industry at next month's lab, July 30th at 3:45 here and online. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
You know, we have the American